Welcome, all you sinners and sodomites, to episode 45 of Bible Stories for Atheists. I am Josh.
I'm Linz.
And we are your guides to the cravenly Christian stories, literally littering the Bible. Linz, thank you for being here on this episode. I know you are not feeling great.
No, I'm probably in like the third worst pain I've ever had in my entire life. Directly behind childbirth and the severe infection I had in one of my teeth a long time ago. Mouth pain is not anything to laugh at.
No. You really can't laugh.
No, but right behind that is just severe shoulder pain.
Yeah. Had an injured shoulder and have been kind of laid up by it, but
yeah,
managed to deal with it enough to get through this episode. So that's awesome. We appreciate it. So we'll be quick with this intro is basically what I'm saying. We're doing Joshua part 3. We're wrapping up Joshua in this episode, but we'll get to all that. So we got some messages from listeners that were pretty awesome.
I feel like we need to start calling this like a BSFA confessional.
Oh, that's something. A good name for it. It's time to get in our confessional. We'll have to come up with something for that. Yeah. So you want to read one from Dwight?
Yeah, so we actually read a review from Dwight.
It was as D something. I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yep. And I had made the note that because they used the term taking the piss, that I assumed that they were from overseas. And I was incorrect, but not completely. Right. Because they had spent some time overseas.
We also had mentioned, we were talking about St. Patrick's Day and stuff like that. And we were like, does anybody celebrate the 4th of July overseas and stuff like that? And that kind of related to this too.
Yes. So this is a snippet from the response that Dee sent us. It starts with as far as I know, not so much, as in
the 4th of July.
4th of July.
Yeah.
But I have been invited to people's homes in Europe to celebrate Thanksgiving. I'm really responding because I wanted to tell you about Susie Weiss. She was a German woman that was in her late 60s when I met her. I believe she worked in the fashion industry. Don't remember exactly because I'm now old. Wait, let me reread that. I believe she worked in the fashion industry. Don't remember exactly because I too am now old. But Susie was eccentric to say the least. One year, she invited a big group of beautiful people to her very bohemian Parisian apartment for what turned out to be an amazing Thanksgiving dinner. I'm just going to stop right there and add some commentary. I'm very jealous by this idea. This is like my dream scenario.
Celebrating Thanksgiving in a Parisian apartment.
Surrounded by a bunch of beautiful, interesting people. It just sounds like how I want to be spending my time.
Yeah.
Okay, back to the thing. Funny thing about sweet elderly Susie was that the first thing you saw walking into her apartment was a penis. You looked around to find the entire apartment was adorned in penises. Porcelain penises, glass penises, disco ball penises, pink glitter penises, penises of all sizes, colors, and shapes, everywhere. You know how some old women hoard angels and cherubs? Well, it was like that, but with penises. And yes, there were penises on the dinner table too. I'm sure a few pilgrims rolled over in their graves that evening. I love this story so much.
Yeah. When I first read it, I was like, oh, that's Lindsay when she gets older.
Susie Weiss is my hero. Yeah. I don't know who she is, and I haven't made an effort to look up if she's like somebody I can research, but she sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And I don't have a bunch of penises all over the house, but I have started a collection of
boob cups. Yeah. That's the first thing I thought is, oh, that's funny. For Lindsay, it's boob cups.
Yeah, I have a lot of cups that are boobs. They're coffee cups with boobs painted on them, cups in the shape of boobs, just boobs. I love them.
We did get another message. This one was very different. This is the first one we've gotten like this, and it's from somebody named Rick, and you can tell from how it starts out. Appalling. I found your podcast when I was looking for Bible readings, and I found this garbage. I've been fervently praying for your lost souls so that Jesus, the Lord, would send his Holy Spirit to save you from hellfire. Do you understand that hell is real? Heavenly Father, please, he's talking to God now. He didn't email God though. He just emailed us. Heavenly Father, please use this message to allow these evil people to see the sinfulness of their ways. May they repent and come to you. Amen. Just kidding. Haha. You guys fucking rock. Fucking rock. I love how Lynn's questions everything. Josh, kudos on your most thorough research. Your podcast is funny as fucking hell and informative as well. I grew up in the Baptist cult or faith and desperately tried to find God for almost 40 years.
Oh.
Little did I know he doesn't even exist. Your podcast always leaves me looking at Bible stories in a totally different light, how ridiculous they are, and laughing my senior overweight lily white ass off. Thank you, sinners and sodomites. You fucking rock. So that's awesome.
I love that.
Yeah.
Josh sent that to me and I started reading it and I was like, oh, it finally happened.
Yeah, it was the same thing when I read it. Yeah.
I had expected this to happen at some point. The wrong person was going to listen to the podcast and just be super offended and then take it upon their personal mission to let us know that we're wrong and they're right. We're going to burn in hell.
Yeah.
Like we haven't heard that before.
Just in life.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, well, that's a bummer that somebody actually took their time to waste their time on that. So it was a good trick. I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah, that was a good one, Rick.
Yeah. The confessional is closed
for this
podcast.
Yeah. So strap in, strap on for episode 45. Josh dies at the end. Need to prepare the listeners. Frodo has been quite vocal lately, so we're probably going to get a lot of those little meows in there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, Frodo.
Secondary preparation. If I'm not as funny as I normally am, that's because I'm in a lot of pain right now.
Right. Hopefully it's not too much.
Yeah. We'll find out.
We'd appreciate your thoughts and prayers.
Just throw them right at me.
Yeah.
All over my face, neck, and chest.
None of which are the problem areas.
No. Nope.
Okay, so previously on BSFA, we talked about Joshua and the quote-unquote battle of Jericho.
Oh, right. The walking and the yelling.
Yeah, which I don't think we talked about this, but it's not a battle.
If one side's just killing the other side?
Yeah.
No, that's a genocide.
Yeah, like it just wasn't even like they marched around and then they shouted and then the wall fell down. I guess they fought then. I guess they fought by rushing in.
Right, and killing a bunch of people.
Yeah, but it's not like when people talk about the Battle of Jericho, like they're talking about them walking around and shouting,
right?
Which is not a battle.
That's what a good percentage of the homeless people who live in Grand Rapids do. So,
right.
Are we in a battle?
Yeah. Well, conservatives would say yes. They're poor because they don't love God enough.
Oh,
Anyway, so yeah, there's the Battle of Jericho, and then there's the Battle of Ai. And we had Achan. Achan. Possibly. We don't know how he's.
Definitely. That's the way you say it.
And he was, he stole something. He took something from.
It was like some silver and some gold and some other trinkets and buried it.
From Jericho,
right.
Which was supposed to be destroyed.
Yes, they weren't supposed to take anything unless it was wealth, and then they were supposed to give that to God.
And he took some of the wealth and that was supposed to be given to quote unquote given to God.
God needs it.
Yeah.
God made it.
Right.
Arguably could just make his own.
Yeah.
If he needed it. If he needed to go to the store, he could just, I don't know, create gold out of nowhere. Yeah. Or really just create whatever it is that he needs.
Right. Yeah.
So I don't know why.
instead of having to buy it.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know why God needs wealth, but
well, because capitalism is godly.
Yes.
So God therefore would obviously buy anything he needs,
right.
Which is why he needs us to give him money.
Yes.
So capitalism.
I see.
Anyway, so yeah, Achan took that stuff and then that pissed off God. So then they tried to take IE. They had 36
got spanked
or 38 people killed.
Yes.
On their end.
A nominal amount of people.
Yeah. And they were like, oh no. And Joshua turned into a little bitch.
Yes.
Over it. Just
he did.
Blubbering.
And then God decided to suss out the person who was responsible for it very much in a manner in which Lois from Malcolm in the Middle would have done with her children.
Just slowly narrow. What, Frodo? You have food, water, you have everything you could possibly need in life.
He doesn't have catnip.
Yeah, that's true.
Cut him off from his catnip supply because he is a fiend.
It started feeling like giving heroin to a heroin addict, and it was just like he's not any happier with it.
No, seems more miserable. Anyway,
let's just talk about that for the rest of the episode.
So then they sussed out who it was, and then they went back and killed everyone in IE.
Correct. Yeah.
A bunch of murder in the name of God.
Yes. And this episode's a little different. Actually, no, it's all the same. It's just more and more murder. More and more murder in the name of God. First up, I don't appreciate your ruse. Now, when all the kings west of the Jordan heard about these things, the kings in the hill country, in the western foothills, and along the entire coast of the Mediterranean Sea as far as Lebanon, they came together to wage war against Joshua and Israel. However, when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to a ruse. They went as a delegation whose donkeys were loaded with worn-out sacks and old wineskins, cracked and mended. They put worn and patched sandals on their feet and wore old clothes. All the bread of their food supply was dry and moldy. Then they went to Joshua and said to him and the Israelites, "We have come from a distant country. Make a treaty with us." The Israelites said to the Hivites, "But perhaps you live near us, so how can we make a treaty with you?" "We are your servants," they said to Joshua. But Joshua asked, "Who are you and where do you come from?" They answered, "Your servants have come from a very distant country because of the fame of the Lord your God. For we have heard reports of him and all that he did in Egypt. And our elders and all those living in our country said to us, 'Take provisions for your journey. Go and meet them and say to them, we are your servants. Make a treaty with us. This bread of ours was warm when we packed it at home on the day that we left to come to you. But now see how dry and moldy it is? And these wineskins that we filled were new, but see how cracked they are, and our clothes and sandals are worn out by the very long journey." The Israelites sampled their provisions, but did not inquire of the Lord. Then Joshua made a treaty of peace with them and let them live, and the leaders of the assembly ratified it by oath. So yeah, they
tricked him.
They tricked them.
He's a little suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
A little suspicious. But it didn't take long for them to alleviate him of his suspicion.
Right. So this did inspire me to look up, like, all right, who are the Hivites? Apparently, according to Wikipedia, the Hivites were one group of descendants of Canaan, son of Ham, which is kind of an interesting thing because I didn't even really put, like, I think I knew this, but I forgot about it, that Canaan, again, son of Ham, who was Noah's son.
Right.
So, like, Noah's kids are where all of these people supposedly come from.
Ah, right.
Right. So,
and Ham is the one that saw his dad's penis and therefore was cursed.
I think you might be right. Yeah, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think you're right
or
about
something
that.
like that.
Yeah.
It's ambiguous as to why he was cursed. Yeah. But.
And there's a possibility that he actually, like, raped Noah in one of the versions of the story.
trail to go down.
Yeah.
When literally the phrase is saw his father's nakedness, and somebody at some point in time was like, he raped his own father.
Well,
what's going on with that thought process?
I think it's the reverse. I think they think
like
it was originally that they raped it, and somebody along the way changed it to saw his nakedness.
It's just a weird, like trail to go down in your brain. Even like the odds of that happening are probably pretty low.
I mean, the odds of the entire story happening is really low. Anyway, so like the Israelites and everything, they're descended from one of Noah's kids named Shem, which is, I'm pretty sure, where we end up getting Semite. And Semitic is from Shem. A variety of proposals have been made, but beyond the references in the Bible to the Hivites in the land of Canaan, no consensus has been reached about their precise historical identity. So nobody actually knows who the Hivites were.
Well, it sounds to me like they're very good at adapting to their situation. So if they existed historically, they might have just been nomads. Because if they were willing to basically do what they just did to protect themselves, that's not just an idea you come up with suddenly.
Right.
Like, you're not just sitting around and like, you know what we can do? We can all pretend we traveled a really long way to get here to like give ourselves over to them, and they'll be impressed with our travels, and then we'll be protected. But like, would you be able to just come up with that idea?
Right. Yeah. So it's funny you say that though, because apparently the name comes from tent dweller.
I mean, it makes sense. If people are settled in their home, in their area, in their land, right, then they're more willing to put up a fight to protect it. But if you are nomadic people and you have no ties to a particular area, then of course you'll fucking pick everything up and walk over and be like, hey, we're here to not be attacked by you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us what you need us to do.
Right. Apparently, several places in the Bible, too, there's differences between which version of the Bible you're looking at, that you'll see Hivites or Hittites. It's possible that it's just somebody got the spelling wrong, essentially, on Hittites.
Right.
And Hittites are actually like a known people that came from, I think, like they, if I remember correctly, they descended from Turkey. Like people in modern day Turkey are descendants of theirs,
Gotcha.
So all that happens. And then they hear that these people actually do live nearby. It doesn't say where they hear that from, but they heard about it. So they head out to these cities that these people live in. The whole assembly grumbled against the leaders, but all the leaders answered, "We have given them our oath by the Lord, the God of Israel, and we cannot touch them now. This is what we will do to them. We will let them live so that God's wrath will not fall on us for breaking the oath we swore to them." They continued, "Let them live, but let them be woodcutters and water carriers in the service of the whole assembly." So the leader's promise to them was kept. Then Joshua summoned the Gibeonites and said, "Why did you deceive us by saying, 'We live a long way from you,' while actually you live near us? You are now under a curse. You will never be released from service as woodcutters and water carriers for the house of my God." They answered Joshua, "Your servants were clearly told how the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you the whole land and to wipe out all its inhabitants from before you. So we feared for our lives because of you. And that is why we did this. We are now in your hands. Do to us whatever seems good and right to you." So Joshua saved them from the Israelites, and they did not kill them. That day he made the Gibeonites woodcutters and water carriers for the assembly, to provide for the needs of the altar of the Lord at the place that the Lord would choose. And that is what they are to this day.
Are they?
Yeah.
Sounds like they all just got lifelong jobs.
Sounds like they're slaves.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course.
That's well, actually, like as we get through the stories in this episode, it sounds more and more like they're essentially setting up a caste system.
Right. One could say, obviously, there's historically been a differentiation between slavery, which is the ownership of people, and people who are conscripted to doing hard labor, through like I'll bring you over to the United States. I'll pay for your journey over here, but then you have to work for me for the rest of your life to pay that off. Nobody's really owning anybody else, but they've set up a system of which you owe them something. So therefore you have to work for them for the rest of your life.
Yeah. In the US, we had, mining towns and stuff like that, where like people would owe money to the company for like their equipment and stuff like that. And they would have to work that off.
Yeah.
And like they would find, and their housing and stuff like that would all come from the company, and they would have to work for all of that stuff and build up debt.
Yeah. Well, and
the company.
Subsistence farming, is that what it is? Right.
Maybe.
After they got rid of slavery, they gave
sharecropping.
Sharecropping. Yes. Where they are working their farm, but it's not.
Right.
You know what I mean? They have to, it's just all a new fancy word for forcing people to do things that they wouldn't normally do.
Yeah. So he calls them Gibeonites in this. So Gibeon was a city just north of Jerusalem. It'd be like saying, somebody from Ireland who lives in New York. Like they're a New Yorker, but they're also Irish,
Right.
I'll stop the world and melt with you. Now Adonai-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, heard that Joshua had taken Ai and totally destroyed it. And the people of Gibeon had made a treaty of peace with Israel and had become their allies. He and his people were very much alarmed at this, because Gibeon was an important city, like one of the royal cities. It was larger than Ai, and all its men were good fighters. So Adonai-Zedek appealed to Hoham, king of Hebron, Piram, king of Jarmuth, Japhia, king of Lachish, and Debir, king of Eglon. Come up and help me attack Gibeon, he said, because it has made peace with Joshua and the Israelites. Then the 5 kings of the Amorites joined forces. They moved up with all their troops and took positions against Gibeon and attacked it. The Gibeonites then sent word to Joshua, "Do not abandon your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us. Help us, because all the Amorite kings from the hill country have joined forces against us." So Joshua marched up from Gilgal with his entire army, including all the best fighting men. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them. I have given them into your hand. Not one of them will be able to withstand you." So yeah, we're about to get a major battle.
Major battle. What a weird thing for a bunch of nations to do. I mean, it's not, because they do it all the time. But like, they all get together and decide to attack just the city that decided it didn't want to get completely murdered by Joshua.
Right. Yeah.
Instead of being like, oh, look at what they did. Maybe we should also try and do something similar.
Yeah.
So that we don't all die. Instead, let's just kick the puppy while it's down. Let's show our strength by killing a bunch of people who up until a couple days ago were our friends.
Right.
Why not? I also found it interesting that, what was the first king's name?
Adonai-Zedek.
Yeah, you seem very at ease pronouncing that one, but then you got to like...
It was tough with the other ones. Hoham,
yeah,
king of Hebron.
You really struggle with
Hoham.
Hoham. But the other...
Piram, king of Jarmuth.
Yeah.
I think I'm a big fan of his movies, Jarmuth. Japhia, king of Lachish. It's the best I can guess for how to pronounce that. And Debir, king of Eglon, which sounds like it's straight out of a Tolkien novel.
It does.
So then we get to one of the more famous things that happens in the book of Joshua.
Oh, okay.
Like, it's right up there with the Battle of Jericho, which I actually thought this happened during the Battle of Jericho because, I didn't actually read this stuff apparently when I was a Christian. After an all-night march from Gilgal, Joshua took them by surprise. The Lord threw them into confusion before Israel. So Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely at Gibeon. Israel pursued them along the road, going up to Beth Horon, and cut them down all the way to Azekah and Mekkedah. As they fled before Israel, the Lord hurled large hailstones down on them, and more of them died from the hail than were killed by the swords of the Israelites. On the day that the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon." So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. As it is written in the book of Jashar, the sun stopped in the middle of the day and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a human being. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. So there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that's like one of the more famous parts of the story because I'm not the metric at which this stuff should be judged on popularity, but I have never heard any of that before.
Yeah. So what happened, it's not like the cartoons when I was growing up, but the sun
Oh, you mean
stops.
they just don't get to the fucking point?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the sun stops
Right.
for a day.
It just, so the earth stops rotating.
Or, well, no, the sun goes around the earth. Lindsay. No, I mean, yeah, in theory, that's what happens, right?
Right.
Is that the earth would have stopped rotating for a day.
That doesn't cause any to happen.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure if that happened, literally humans would just fly off the earth. You know what I mean? Like, if we just suddenly came to a stop, I'm pretty sure physically that would launch us into space.
Maybe that's how they won.
Yeah. Is this where leap years come from? Also, is this when we had to start doing leap years?
Because they stopped the rotation of the earth for a whole day.
Yeah. But yeah, it's this.
Why did they stop the sun?
Like, the idea is to give them time to kill their enemies
in daylight.
Yeah. Frodo. Stop. I love you, buddy, but seriously. That one part where Joshua is saying that one, he's so pissed. That one part where Joshua is saying, "Sun stands still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon." So the sun stood still and the moon stopped till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. That is like a poem. It's set up like a poem in the text. And it's the only one, I think, in the entire book of Joshua. So this is likely a direct quote from the book of Jashar.
Yeah, what is
the book of Jashar?
The book of Jashar.
Jashar. So it's Jashar is how it's spelled in the Bible.
Yeah.
Which means the book of the upright, or the book of the just man. Like, maybe it's just man. Just for man. It's either just man or it's just man. Is a book mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, often interpreted as a lost, non-canonical book. Numerous forgeries purporting to be rediscovered copies of the lost book have been written. Different interpretation identifies it as a reference to the Pentateuch. So that's the first 5 books of the Bible.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's what it is. It's a lost book.
I see. So in that book,
it's an older writing.
It predicted that at some point in time the sun would stop, or was it that it predicted that God would listen to a man?
My guess is it was telling this story.
Oh,
is my guess.
Okay.
Like, it also it's a version of the story, and this is like retelling the story in a new way, and it took a quote from it.
How is this the first time God's listened to a man? We know that that's not true.
I know. And that's another weird thing about this, because it says that Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon." You know, he starts talking to the sun and to the moon.
Right. As if they were alive things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which some folks, I think, see this as like possibly them forming a ritual of like, there's a god of the sun and a god of the moon. And this story is like a rehab of that.
Well, you know, obviously in Roman and Greek mythology, especially Roman, there were there was gods of planets. It again, I mean, just because God stopped the sun and the moon, which obviously nothing that didn't happen, but
well, we don't know.
The book's all the way up to this point, just because, I mean, maybe this is like a grand thing that he's done on the behest of a person, of a human, but like from the start of the Bible until this point, people have asked God for things and he's given it to them.
Yeah. The impression I got from it is it's almost like he's saying to do this, like he's telling God and God listens.
I see.
You know,
that is not what I got from that sentence.
I know. And ultimately that's not what like is doctrine, like
Right.
that anybody could ever tell God what to do
Right.
and God would do it, you know.
Yeah, and he's not talking to God, he's talking to the sun.
Yeah.
And
the moon.
and God was listening apparently and was like, "Hey, I can make that happen."
Yeah. It's very weird. It's very, very weirdly written little passage.
It's like
there.
it's definitely trying to elevate Joshua into like a almost like a lesser deity place.
Yeah.
He's somebody who's coming up through the ranks after Moses died, right? And he's done all these things, but like at this point he's only just been like a really good general. But now it seems like in this act, what would come out of this is like a holiness. Because if you can command something like that and God does it for you, then what are you but just like one step under God? And this is before Jesus, right?
Yes.
There's no son of God yet. So this would be the closest thing that you could get to. Be like the Pope these days, although people don't even believe that about the Pope anymore.
Right. Yeah. Definitely strikes me as there have been older versions of it, obviously, with this Book of Joshua reference.
Yeah.
You know, there's obviously older versions of this story, and this is just the people who came last. That it's their version.
Definitely. Because
I wouldn't be surprised if they got rid of the Book of Joshua.
Yeah.
Like that's why we don't have any copies of it.
Well, 100%. Like we've explored this through a bunch of different stories in the Bible, but like I'm sure you could go back and find some story about a Greek god or something out of like oral tradition, ancient religions that is the exact same story.
Yeah.
Because stopping the sun and stopping the moon is like a thing, right? It's a big thing. And back then, you know, people didn't understand anything.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that. So there was an argument when I was a kid that there was evidence of this story being real.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So the argument is that there are legends of a long day in Egypt and India and China, and a legend of a long night in Native American history. So, like, what do you think? Like, your impression as you hear that?
No, I mean,
what does that? Is that?
Are they talking about like Native people in Alaska? Because certainly there are long nights and days there.
I can't remember who. I felt like it was more like,
well, a long night,
New
just
Mexico
like
or something
to me.
Yeah.
Right. And 100%, an eclipse could cause a long night.
Yeah.
Or it could just be super cloudy. There's been days where it's been storming here and we haven't seen sunshine for weeks.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, like, do you think that?
Do I think that the world stopped rotating and it was daylight in most of the half the world for a whole day and nighttime in half the world, like right around the center of the earth? No, I don't think that happened.
Even though there's these other societies that have said that there's
no, because there's a thing that happens culturally. Like if you look back at the history of Homo sapiens, you will find stories like this that seem to correlate with each other.
Yeah.
But that's because they're just really good stories. Right? They're not unique. They're not like you couldn't sit around and make this shit up, right?
Yeah.
Telling these stories and having something so impactful as it being day all day or night all night.
You're right. Yeah.
Is something that can provide a lot of impact to a story. And it doesn't take a genius to like realize that stuff like that will improve upon the memeability of a story.
Right. Just because the Greeks and the Romans talked about Zeus or somebody similar doesn't mean Zeus existed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just because the Native Americans had a sun god and the Greeks had a sun god and people in medieval Asia had a sun god doesn't mean that there was an actual sun god.
Right.
It just means that everybody realized the importance of the sun. And so they
Deified it.
They deified it. To me, it's more likely that this is just coincidental storytelling than the world actually stopped turning for a day.
And when
it would have thrown us off our fucking rotation.
Yeah.
You know, we wouldn't. I mean,
and from what I've seen, they never were able to confirm like they all happened on the same day or even in the same century.
Right.
Because ultimately they don't even know when Joshua was supposed to happen.
Sure.
However, there is an article that I found where the headline is "Scientists Confirm," and there's quotes around that, Old Testament account of sun standing still during Battle of Joshua 10 due to total solar eclipse. And you know this is reputable because it comes from christianpost.com. It basically says that the day the sun miraculously stood still, which enabled the Israelites to achieve one of their epic battles of victories as described in the Old Testament, has reportedly been confirmed by Israeli scientists because, you know,
they have no benefit to that.
Yeah, there's no
whatsoever.
bias there whatsoever. Yeah. Basically, what they came up with using NASA data, they figured out that there was a total solar eclipse on October 30th, 1207 BCE at 4:26 p.m. I'm guessing local time.
Okay.
And
how does that make the sun stand still?
I don't know. That's what, like, I'm reading through this and it's like that doesn't explain the sun standing still.
No, and
that makes it dark.
Yeah.
I don't
get it either.
It just doesn't, and it also doesn't, like an eclipse, especially a solar eclipse.
Yeah.
Last minutes.
Right.
It just doesn't make any fucking sense to me at all.
And listen, the reason why we exist on this planet is because of the circumstances in which this planet exists. Its exact distance away from the sun, its speed of rotation, its trajectory around the sun is the reason why we are able to exist on this planet. Any change in that would have changed things on this life on this planet dramatically. So there's just no way.
Like I said, it would have thrown us all off into space probably.
Yeah, there's just it's absolutely unfathomable. I would much rather believe that a dude was born to a virgin than that the earth stopped rotating for a full day.
Yeah.
It makes more sense that somehow a chick sat on like a toilet seat that a dude came on and got pregnant.
Right. Yeah.
Than the sun was out for a full day because the earth stopped rotating.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense.
Like they were playing just the tip, but they were doing it wrong.
Right. Yeah. Put it all the way in.
Yeah.
Didn't understand.
Right. Anyway, and then we get this. When Joshua was told that the 5 kings had been found hiding in the cave at Makkedah, he said, "Roll large rocks up to the mouth of the cave and post some men there to guard it. But don't stop. Pursue your enemies. Attack them from the rear and don't let them reach their cities. For the Lord your God has given them into your hand." So Joshua and the Israelites defeated them completely, but a few survivors managed to reach their fortified cities. The whole army then returned safely to Joshua, and no one uttered a word against the Israelites. Joshua said, "Open the mouth of the cave and bring those 5 kings out to me." So they brought the 5 kings out of the cave. When they brought these kings to Joshua, he summoned all the men of Israel and said to the army commanders who had come with him, "Come here and put your feet on the necks of these kings." So they came forward and placed their feet on their necks. Joshua said to them, "Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Be strong and courageous. This is what the Lord will do to all the enemies you are going to fight." Then Joshua put the kings to death and exposed their bodies on 5 poles, and they were left hanging on the poles until evening. At sunset, Joshua gave the order, and they took them down from the poles and threw them into the cave where they had been hiding. At the mouth of the cave, they placed large rocks, which are there to this day.
This is terrible. This is terrible. This story is terrible.
Like is in violent wise? Okay.
It's awful.
Yeah.
It's so awful.
Yeah. Which is actually like a common criticism of this story in like when I was watching videos on it and stuff. They were like, it's pretty violent,
It's pretty violent.
Yeah.
It's like, worthy of war crimes.
Yeah.
It's so fucked up. People were worried about drag queens reading Goodnight Moon to a bunch of children, but are teaching them this in church?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, no, I mean, that would imply that they're reading this to these kids, and not just making cartoons about it.
Plus, it sounds like a rally cry, right? This is what we do to our enemies. We step on their necks.
Yeah.
If that hasn't been used throughout the years to justify Christian violence, then I don't know what a better thing could be.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty vicious, and it's just going to keep going from here. I mean, I guess as we get through this, it does become, it all starts blending together. You know what I mean?
Fucked up.
Yeah.
It's so fucked up.
Yeah.
Listen, I think that parents know what their children are capable of, right?
Mm-hmm.
They know what they can handle. If you're a parent who shows your kids horror movies when they're too young, whatever, that's on you. If you fuck them up, you fuck them up. If they love it, then they love it. And you create somebody who really loves horror movies when they're older. It doesn't matter. Each thing is personal. But this is an exalted book of the Bible. It's so violent.
Mm-hmm.
It's more violent. We watched Cocaine Bear the other day, and I would say that this is way more violent than that movie was.
Yeah.
And there was a lot going on in that movie.
Yeah. Well, that's what we haven't covered, is that Joshua is on cocaine throughout most of this. Which explains a lot of what God's telling him. So after that, Joshua goes to another city, and guess what?
Kills them all.
Kills everyone there. No survivors. Then another city, and then another city, and then another city, and then another city. And then we get this. So Joshua subdued the whole region, together with all their kings. He left no survivors. He totally destroyed all who breathed, just as the Lord, the God of Israel, had commanded. All these kings and their lands Joshua conquered in one campaign, because the Lord, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. So this is jumping ahead a little bit, but they later give a list of the number of kings he killed, which was 31.
And all of the people in their cities. So each king had a city.
In theory, yeah.
And they killed everybody in the cities.
Yeah, each of these cities seems to have had a king. Also, I haven't double checked which cities were totally destroyed and which weren't, but there are several later that say they didn't kill everyone there, and those survivors still live among the Israelites to this day. You know, they're inconsistent with it.
Right. I mean, there was that one, and I think in your reading before the last one, you mentioned the phrase, and everything was destroyed completely, or everybody was killed completely. I mean, the word completely was used. And then immediately after that, it says, except for some people who escaped and made it back to their cities.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, I don't think you understand what the word completely means.
No, totally. Yep. That's the weird thing about it. And that's actually one of the justifications you get from some Christians I've heard when talking about Joshua and Judges and stuff like that, especially Joshua, is, well, they didn't actually kill everybody.
Right.
So it's not, it seems violent, but it's actually it's just propaganda, and they didn't actually kill. And it's like, well, then the Bible's not perfect.
Yeah.
First of all.
So
because it's obviously lying then in the Bible.
Right.
You know?
So the serial killer from California.
You're going to have to be more specific.
The Ramos, I think was his last name.
Are you thinking of John Stamos?
No.
Oh, from American Horror Story, the 80s season.
Yes.
Night Stalker?
The Night Stalker. They had the hardest time with that serial killer. I mean, they eventually figured out who he was because he left people alive, right? So people could ID him. And that would be like saying that he's not that bad because he didn't kill everybody.
Right. Yeah.
He left that old lady alive over there. He only raped this lady.
Yeah.
He didn't kill everybody, just some of the people.
I feel like,
therefore, not bad. Not
I feel
bad.
like there are some modern Christians who have said that about mass shooters.
Yeah. You know, killing 98% of the people. Well, there's still they left 2% of them. So let's pull back on that.
See, this
a little bit.
God didn't order genocide. They left a few of them alive.
Not everybody died in the concentration camps.
Yeah.
What's the fucking difference?
Right.
Except that this dude's in the Bible and Hitler's not. If you put Hitler in the Bible, people would be saying the exact same shit about him.
Yeah.
I mean, that is fucked up.
Lord knows there are plenty of Christians who would put Hitler in the Bible if they could. Anyway, that's depressing.
It is depressing.
Killing in the name of God. A bunch of remaining kings band together their armies, which I thought that's what the last one was, but we get the sequel. This is the Return of the Kings. A bunch of remaining kings band their armies together to try and fight off Israel, and we get this. They came out with all their troops and a large number of horses and chariots, a huge army, as numerous as the sand on the seashore. All these kings joined forces and made camp together at the waters of Meow to fight against Israel. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them, because by this time tomorrow I will hand all of them slain over to Israel. You are to hamstring their horses and burn their chariots." So Joshua and his whole army came against them suddenly at the waters of Meow and attacked them. And the Lord gave them into the hand of Israel. They defeated them and pursued them all the way to Greater Sidon until no survivors were left. Joshua did to them as the Lord had directed. He hamstrung their horses and burned their chariots. At that time, Joshua turned back and captured Hazor and put its king to the sword. Hazor had been the head of all these kingdoms. Everyone in it they put to the sword. They totally destroyed them, not sparing anyone that breathed. And he burned Hazor itself. Joshua took all these royal cities and their kings and put them to the sword. He totally destroyed them as Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded. Yet Israel did not burn any of the cities built on their mounds, except Hazor, which Joshua burned. The Israelites carried off for themselves all the plunder and livestock of these cities, but all the people they put to the sword until they completely destroyed them, not sparing anyone that breathed. As the Lord commanded his servant Moses, so Moses commanded Joshua, and Joshua did it. He left nothing undone of all that the Lord commanded Moses.
Did you have did you go back and reread a whole section? Like, you said a paragraph, and then the next paragraph was the almost exact same words.
I'm gonna have to check the audio because I'm looking at the text and I'm not seeing a significant copy, but I don't think so. I'm not sure.
Because he keeps talking about taking all the kings and putting them to the sword.
Yeah.
It says that a couple times.
It's a lot of putting them to swords.
Yeah. It's a very poetic way of saying that you killed a bunch of people with a sword.
Yeah. There's more death, more destruction.
Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. More killings, more killing kings.
Yep.
And then we get Joshua 11:20, where it says, "For it was the Lord himself who hardened the hearts to wait." Frodo, I'm quoting scripture. "For it was the Lord himself who hardened their hearts to wage war against Israel, so that he might destroy them totally, exterminating them without mercy, as the Lord had commanded Moses." So remember this for anyone who ever tells you that God gives us free will.
Right.
Because they didn't have a choice in this.
He hardened their hearts.
Right. God forced them to fight so that they would be killed. Just like Pharaoh in the story of Moses.
Yeah, he kept hardening his heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So God is just choosing to kill these people.
Right.
For some reason.
Yeah, because it is definitely more likely that after seeing everything go down, that a lot of these kings would have made the opposite decision.
And if God is making the choice to harden their hearts, why couldn't he make, much like the issue folks have with Thanos,
right?
Why didn't he just double the resources in the universe instead of wiping out half the people?
Right.
Why didn't God just soften their hearts and bring them
to move?
convince them to move, convince them to follow, follow God and be godly like the Israelites
that like
are.
his whole purpose?
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like that is his purpose.
No, it seems like
he has figured out exactly who he wants his followers to be.
Racially.
Yeah. Yes. And then everything else is like, kill him.
Right. And let's point out, I still have yet to see, and I do want to look this up, but I have yet to see anywhere in the Bible where it does actually say that the Canaanites here, all these people scattered throughout Canaan, I have yet to see where it says that they were practicing child sacrifice and that's why that they're going after them. But that's the reason that's always given, is that these people were, committing child sacrifice and they were evil. And so they needed to kill all these people. And it's like, yeah, but you're also killing their kids.
Children, yeah.
Like that doesn't make any fucking sense.
I mean, listen, the argument to protect children clearly has just been used for a really long time. And it never nobody actually ever, you can't in one breath say that like we're outlawing this one thing because we think it's harmful to children and also be like, well, but I also think they should be able to get married at 12.
Yeah. We're going to limit the First Amendment, your First Amendment rights of freedom of speech by getting rid of drag shows and stuff like that.
To protect the children.
But we cannot limit the Second Amendment to protect children.
Right. It's convenience, whatever works best for your way of thinking. It's literally taking something that maybe at its inset was intended to be like a good, like, book of how to get through life back then and completely manipulate it so that it aligns to your modern beliefs. It's building God in your own image, and that is, to my understanding, is one of the worst sins that you could do. But it seems to be what most people end up doing.
Yeah. And then the chapter ends with this. So Joshua took the entire land just as the Lord had directed Moses, and he gave it as an inheritance to Israel according to their tribal divisions. Then the land had rest from war.
Finally, after everyone was dead.
Yeah. Except, not really, because there's going to be some more fighting.
Oh.
Big Little Spies. In chapter 12, we start getting them cutting up the territories to the different tribes. I'm skipping a lot of boring stuff here. A lot of boring stuff. We get the list of the 31 kings that Joshua killed, but he's still not done. There are still some more that are going to get killed. At the beginning of chapter 13, God tells Joshua, "You are now very old, and there are still very large areas of land to be taken over." He proceeds to list out all the lands that still need to be taken and divided up for the tribes. The only tribe that doesn't get land is the tribe of Levi. And it says this, Joshua 13, verse 14, "But to the tribe of Levi, he gave no inheritance, since the food offerings presented to the Lord, the God of Israel, are their inheritance as he promised them." So the Levites are the tribe that are priests.
Oh.
They're the ones that are like supposedly sons of Aaron and Moses.
Okay.
So their inheritance is getting all the food sacrifices that are done at eventually the temple, or right now the tabernacle.
So somebody sacrifices a goat and then the priests get to eat the goat.
I guess. Yeah. Okay. That's how that works. And then the last line of the chapter is this: "But to the tribe of Levi, Moses had given no inheritance. The Lord, the God of Israel, is their inheritance as he promised them." So it's within the same chapter. It's the same thing twice, except this time it's just God is their
right.
is what they get.
Isn't that everybody's prize?
Yeah, really. Shouldn't it be? But I heard a theory, I think it was from Bart Ehrman, that this was likely a tribe that had arrived late in the area, the Levites, and worked out a deal with the other tribes to not be given any land, but they would get to serve as priests. I haven't confirmed this myself, but apparently Egyptian names are more common in the Levite tribe than any other tribe. And it's possible that these are actually the people who left Egypt and brought the characters of Yahweh, Moses, and Aaron. The tribes that were already in the area had the god El. Their supreme sky god, the equivalent of Zeus in their pantheon. And then the Levites convinced them that Yahweh and El were the same. Anyway, in chapter 14, Caleb shows up again. I don't know if you remember, he was the other spy that checked out Israel ahead of time with Joshua and got the pass on being able to
Oh, yeah.
make it into the promised land. This got me questioning, like, all right, what was the story of them spying out the land again? And so here's a quick version of that story. Editor Josh here. I'm going to go ahead and explain this because recording Josh did a terrible job of it. This story is found in Numbers, chapters 13 and 14. Moses is still alive, and the Israelites are wandering the desert. As a reminder, the first 5 books of the Bible were written by at least 4 different sources. Check out our episode all about the he said, she said bullshit for more info on that. This story is actually 2 different versions of the same story cut together. It starts out simple. There's 12 spies going into Canaan to check out the land for 40 days. And then they come back to report on what they saw. Now, in one version, the spies come back. They say the cities in Canaan are large and fortified, and that the people there are stronger than the Israelites. But Caleb says that they should attack and shows confidence that they would be successful. Unfortunately, the people are already freaked out by the other spies, and they won't listen. Now, in the other version of the story, Caleb and Joshua say that they can take the land. And then we get God's response to this. In the first version, God gets pissed and he says, "How long will these people treat me with contempt? How long will they refuse to believe in me, in spite of all the miraculous signs I have performed among them? I will strike them down with a plague and destroy them." And Moses is like, whoa, if you do that, the Egyptians are going to think Yahweh isn't even powerful enough to get his people into the land you promised them. If you really want to show them how powerful you are, you should just forgive us and give us the land. and God is like,
all right.
Yeah, okay, sure. I'll forgive you, but no one who was alive when you left Egypt will be alive to see the land of Canaan, right?
Except,
and then he says, but my servant Caleb has a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly. I will bring him into the land he went to, and his descendants will inherit it. No mention of Joshua at all in the Yahwist version of this story. Then the priestly source gives their version of it. And keep in mind, literally right before this, God has relented in this other version.
Mm-hmm.
God has relented and said that he was forgiving everyone, but they weren't going to make it into the promised land. And then we get this. And the Lord spoke to Moses and to Aaron, saying, "How long shall this wicked congregation complain against me? I have heard the complaints of the Israelites, which they complain against me. Say to them, as I live, says the Lord, I will do to you the very things I heard you say. Your dead bodies shall fall in this very wilderness. And of all your number included in the census from 20 years old and up who have complained against me, not one of you shall come into the land in which I swore to settle you, except Caleb and Joshua. But your little ones, who you said would become plunder, I will bring in, and they shall know the land that you have despised. But as for you, your dead bodies shall fall in this wilderness, and your children shall be shepherds in the wilderness for 40 years, and shall suffer for your faithlessness, until the last of your dead bodies lies in the wilderness. According to the number of the days in which you spied out the land, 40 days, for every day a year, you shall bear your iniquity. 40 years, and you shall know my displeasure. I, the Lord, have spoken. Surely I will do thus to all this wicked congregation gathered together against me. In this wilderness they shall come to a full end, and there they shall die. And the men whom Moses sent to spy and made all the congregation complain against him by bringing a bad report about the land died by a plague before the Lord. But Joshua and Caleb alone remained alive. So Joshua is only mentioned in the priestly text. Now it could be that the Yahwist writers just didn't like Joshua for some reason.
Mm.
But most likely, Caleb was their version of Joshua.
Mm.
Like they may have had an entire history written where Caleb was the one who was
Did
the
all this
general
stuff.
that defeated the Canaanites,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. But every time I hear stuff like that, I'm just like, this God sounds like an angry teenage kid.
Yeah.
Like an emo kid.
You would think he would be more understanding of people, you know?
I mean, he did make them.
Yeah.
But also, like,
And is all knowing.
if he, yeah, the want and the need for like complete worship is a bit odd for somebody who just has everything they could possibly need or want or make, or who has lived an eternity already. All of a sudden, he needs the love and affection and complete control over this group of people. What did he do before that?
It'd be interesting. Like at some point, I do want to go back to Genesis and go, because we never really covered Abraham, but you know,
Yeah.
it all kind of started with him. It'd be good to go back and see like what does it say as far as like why him, you know?
Like, I wouldn't even date a guy that was that needy,
Yeah.
let alone
Yeah.
kind of like commit my whole livelihood to them.
Yeah.
It's just-
Yeah. I mean, especially if he breaks out on the first date, like I'm God.
yeah. And if you don't follow me, I'm gonna kill you. I'd be
Yeah.
like, oh, okay,
Red
restraining order
flags.
time.
Yeah. I noticed you didn't put any of this on your Bumble profile.
But instead, we've chose to like, I don't know, just kind of be like, yeah, that's just God. I'm sorry if there's qualities that you wouldn't want in like a human, maybe also wouldn't want them in all knowing, all powerful figurehead.
Yeah.
Seems like a weakness.
Mhm. Copy of a copy of a. I'm doing a lot of song lyrics.
I noticed
Well,
that.
this
Very,
one.
very pop culture-y.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm skipping a lot more.
Okay.
If you doubt that this shit is boring and I just don't feel like reading it, here's a taste of what it sounds like. The lot for the tribe of the people of Judah, according to their families, reached southward to the boundary of Edom to the wilderness of Zin at the farthest south, and their south boundary ran from the end of the Dead Sea from the bay that faces southward. It goes southward from the ascent of Akrabim, passes along to Zin, and goes up from Kadesh Barnea along by Hezron up to Adar, makes a turn to Karka, passes along to Asmon, goes out by the Wadi of Egypt, and comes to an end at the sea. This shall be your south boundary. So that's the stuff I'm skipping. There's a very short, weird story where Caleb basically puts out a bounty on this land that he's inheriting. He'll give his daughter in marriage to anyone who takes it from the natives. So this guy, Othniel, son of Kansas, son of Kansas. He's from Kansas. The brother of Caleb does this. And
Wait.
and he does marry her.
Wait,
Yeah.
his brother?
Yeah.
Why did they have to put all that other shit in there then? Why couldn't they just be like, Caleb's brother decided he wanted to fuck his niece,
Yeah.
so he went and stole the land from the natives and gave it to Caleb, and now he gets to fuck his niece.
Right. I mean, that's basically it.
The end.
Yeah, that is the story. So he does marry her. Now it says Caleb's brother, but they say many times that Caleb is the son of Jephunneth and Othniel is son of Kansas.
Oh, well, maybe they both have the same mom.
Maybe. So I looked up Othniel's Wikipedia, and apparently, according to the Talmud, which is the oral tradition that goes along with the written text, right?
Yep.
Like in Judaism.
Hold on a sec.
Okay.
I can't.
With
Take
him.
with this fucking cat anymore. Go.
He's just gonna meow from down there.
That's fine. It's
Yeah.
farther away.
Yeah. You want me? Okay. Lindsay's giving a talking to Frodo right now. Oh, you broke out the spray bottle? It's the one with bleach in it, right?
No. I'm not a monster. I'm just pissed off. Now I need a nap.
Yeah.
That was a lot of activity.
So I looked up Othniel's Wikipedia, and apparently the Talmud, which is the oral tradition that goes along with the written Bible in Judaism, does say that they are brothers. So at best, he might have been Caleb's nephew, apparently, but nonetheless, it's definitely weird. Also, for occupation on Wikipedia, I noticed it said that he was the first judge of Israel. So he's going to be showing up again in the book of Judges.
The brother?
Yeah, Othniel.
Othniel. Yeah. Oh, Othniel's the brother, not the dad. Wait, hold on.
Caleb was the one who put out the bounty of his daughter.
Othniel was the brother.
Yeah, who
married his
niece. Yeah. Or cousin at best.
Relative.
Yeah.
Married a relative.
So
whatever floats your boat, I guess.
Yeah.
Although she was probably 12.
Yeah, who knows? One last thing I found interesting about this, the people Caleb is fighting here are inhabitants of Debir. However, back in Joshua 10, it says, then Joshua with all Israel turned back to Debir and assaulted it, and he took it with its king and all its towns. They struck them with the edge of the sword and utterly destroyed every person in it. He left no one remaining, just as he had done to Hebron and he had done to blah, blah, blah. So he did to Debir and its king. So he totally destroyed everyone, and except these people, I guess, who also needed to be killed. Anyway, and then in chapter 17, when they're dividing up the land of Manasseh, it says, yet the Manassites could not take possession of these towns, but the Canaanites continued to live in the land. But when the Israelites grew strong, they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not utterly drive them out. So again, more slavery. At the end of chapter 19, when they finish dividing up the land, Joshua gets his inheritance, which is a town of his choosing, and that's where he settles down. Not that the book is done yet, but they just kind of talk about him almost going into retirement.
Yeah.
Kind of. Chapter 20 is dedicated to an interesting rule. Then the Lord spoke to Joshua, saying, say to the Israelites, appoint the cities of refuge, of which I spoke to you through Moses, so that anyone who kills a person without intent or by mistake may flee there. They shall be for you a refuge from the avenger of blood. The slayer shall flee to one of these cities and shall stand at the entrance of the gate of the city and explain the case to the elders of that city. Then the fugitive shall be taken into the city and given a place and shall remain with them. And if the avenger of blood is in pursuit, they shall not give up the slayer, because the neighbor was killed by mistake, there having been no enmity between them before. The slayer shall remain in that city until there is a trial before the congregation, until the death of the one who is high priest at the time. Then the slayer may return home to the town in which the deed was done. So they're going to have refuge towns for
sanctuary cities.
If you killed somebody by accident, basically, and somebody's going to try and kill you for it,
you can go hide.
Yeah, this is apparently that prevalent of an issue.
Wow.
like that they would have several cities just set up for this,
And God is the one who thought of them.
Apparently, yeah.
He was literally like, oh, I saw you kill this person. I know you didn't mean to do it. So just go here. It's like your immoral relative who, if you rob a bank, will hide you in their basement if you give them a little bit of money.
Mm-hmm.
What a weird thing to set up. I can't understand or justify protecting somebody just because they accidentally committed murder. It's still murder.
It seems like what's weird to me is that they would do it just for that circumstance and not like a bunch of other circumstances.
Well, it sounds, obviously a particular type of murder is their goal. Accidental murder, not your fault. It was an accident.
Right.
So just go hide in this city until things work out. So what type of murder is punishable by God?
I mean, intentional. Accidental murder probably is too, because they still need to stand trial for this. It might end up. Yeah,
but isn't there like a whole eye for an eye thing that happens? Isn't that in the Bible? Or is it?
Yeah, it's said in the Bible. It's there's a lot of reasons why you could be killed for stuff you did wrong in the Bible.
I mean, sure.
I don't know all of them off the top of my head, I guess. But I imagine killing somebody even accidentally could, under certain circumstances, lead to you being killed too.
But how many of those people do you actually think did it on accident? And how many people do you actually think said they did it on accident?
Yeah. And they have to explain their case to the elders of the city.
And how many of those people were women? Or do you think the women just got killed right away?
Yeah, they probably just got killed right away. Let's be honest. You know, the last thing you want is a woman who's had a taste for blood.
Tell me about it.
Once they've tasted man, you just can't go back. They're like grizzlies.
I mean, I guess the idea of like cutting down revenge is good, right? You can't just have a bunch of people running around killing each other out of revenge.
Vigilante justice.
Right.
Right.
But it does seem like a weird thing to kind of lean in on. The idea of cities of murderers.
Yeah. I would imagine these are actual cities too, and this is just one of the roles that they play.
It's like ancient Australia.
Yeah. So I did have to cut a little bit out of that reading, though. There's just this weird part where God. Well, here I'll just play you. There having been no enmity between them before. There having been no enmity. There having been no enmity. There having been no enmity. Enmity. There having been no enmity. God damn it. There having been no enmity between them before.
Why didn't you just pull up the word and have Googled tell you how it's pronounced?
It kept sounding right in my head, and then I would say it, and I was like, that's not fucking right.
Enmity?
Yeah. It's like not a word you ever use.
No.
You know, but I just thought it was really funny with the effect on God's voice.
Enmity.
God damn it. Me, damn it.
Why did I make up this word?
Yeah. Anyway, chapter 21.
I'm going to have you cut that out and send it to me so I can listen to it.
Yeah. Chapter 21, still dividing up the land.
A lot of land, Josh. They killed a lot of people.
Yeah, they did. You know, the Levites weren't getting an inheritance because the Lord was their inheritance enough for them. Well, now apparently they're getting a bunch of towns and their pasture lands scattered throughout the other tribes' territories. So they're not like actually getting their own territories, just towns within other tribes' territories.
Okay. Like seminaries.
Probably, yeah. They're starting up a bunch of Christian colleges.
Yeah. Liberty College.
Yeah. In chapter 22, there's a weird story that I'm going to try to paraphrase here. So remember, there's a command that they're not allowed to build altars except for the one for the tabernacle, basically, and eventually the temple. That's the only place you're allowed to give sacrifices. 3 of the tribes who have land on the other side of the Jordan River build an altar, quote, of great size, unquote. The rest of the Israelites freak out and gather at Shiloh ready to make war with them. They go to these tribes and are basically like, what the fuck? You're not supposed to make altars. Remember what happened to Achan or Achan? He didn't die alone, did he? You know, which is an interesting thing for them to say, because we talked about like
whether they actually did kill his,
whether they killed his children with them.
Certainly did.
Yeah. The response is really confusing, but if I'm decoding it correctly, they're basically saying, we were just scared that one day your descendants would say to our descendants that we're not part of Israel because we're on the other side of the Jordan River. So we just built this altar, not for making sacrifices, but to be a reminder to your children and ours that we are actually Israelites. And if your descendants think we're not, then we can be like, look at this copy of an altar our ancestors made.
It's just a tribute.
This is not the greatest altar in the world. This
Yeah.
is just a tribute.
Yeah.
And then the chiefs of the tribes were just cool with that explanation for some reason.
Yes. Parody law goes way back.
Yeah, parody law. Yeah. Yeah. It's such a weird thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, they built this giant altar against the Lord's commands, and then they were basically like, oh, we weren't going to use it.
I mean, this sets precedent for like every single altar in the world now these days, though. You know, the giant crosses and stuff that people have put everywhere.
Yeah.
That seems like something they shouldn't be doing. But I guess one could make the argument, well, we're not sacrificing anything here. Because, I mean, truthfully, nobody's really doing that anymore.
Not in like American Christian communities,
right?
Where nobody's like offering goats
for
sacrifices. I mean, there are probably a few sects of Christians out there that do, but
you remember when that dude was running for state senate or something, and I can't remember, like West Virginia or Virginia or something like that. He wasn't Christian, he was pagan, and they had found out that he sacrificed a goat, and everybody lost their shit. At all. No. Yeah, I don't think he ended up getting elected. He was a terrible person, but it had come up that he had sacrificed a goat. A bunch of people were like, he's a devil worshiper, blah blah blah, and I was like, I don't agree with this guy, and I agree he probably shouldn't be elected, and he seems like a troubled individual. But also, like, didn't you guys used to do that a lot?
Yeah.
Isn't that like part of the whole thing?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people did.
Yeah.
And there's no real clear sign of when that goes away. Yeah. I guess, kind of technically, Jesus, like, is supposed to be the last sacrifice we all need.
Right.
Yeah. But still, it's not practiced in Judaism today.
No.
No.
The
modern equivalent, obviously, is giving offerings.
Sure.
And
I mean, for food to be kosher, it does have to be killed in a certain way.
Yeah.
Which one could kind of tie back to like it being sacrificial.
Right. Because it needs to be blessed by a priest.
Yeah.
And things like
that.
And
it has to be killed humanely. And there's a lot of rules.
The long goodbye. Chapter 23 starts off with this. A long time afterward, when the Lord had given rest to Israel from all their enemies all around, and Joshua was old and well advanced in years, Joshua summoned all Israel, their elders and heads, their judges and officers, and said to them, I am now old and well advanced in years, and you have seen all that the Lord your God has done to all these nations for your sake. For it is the Lord your God who has fought for you. I have allotted to you as an inheritance for your tribes those nations that remain. The Lord your God will push them back before you and drive them out from your sight. Therefore, be very steadfast to observe and do all that is written in the book of law of Moses, so that you may not be mixed with these nations left here among you, or make mention of the names of their gods, or swear by them, or serve them, or bow yourselves down to them. Be very careful, therefore, to love the Lord your God. For if you turn back and join the survivors of these nations left here among you and intermarry with them, know assuredly that the Lord your God will not continue to drive out these nations before you, but they shall be a snare and a trap for you, a scourge on your sides and thorns in your eyes, until you perish from this good land that the Lord your God has given you. And now I am about to go the way of all the earth. And you know in your hearts and souls that not one thing has failed of all the good things that the Lord your God has promised concerning you. But just as all good things that the Lord your God promised have been fulfilled for you, so the Lord will bring upon you all the bad things until he has destroyed you from this good land. If you transgress the covenant of the Lord your God and go and serve other gods and bow down to them, then the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you, and you shall perish quickly from the good land that he has given you.
Ew.
I know, it's a lot of racism.
Yeah, it's pretty terrible.
Yeah. And
I like how it starts out with like God has protected you from our enemies or something like that. And I'm like, it's kind of an easy thing to say somebody's your enemy when you go and it'd be like be like somebody coming to like steal our house from us
yeah.
and then being like, we vanquished our enemies. And you and I are just like,
Who are you?
we didn't do anything. We were
Yeah.
just living in our house.
Yeah.
We're not your enemy.
Right. They were practicing child sacrifices. No, we weren't.
No, we don't have young children. Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
I sprayed my cat with a water bottle. I'm not sure that counts.
It does. That counts.
It
gives us dibs.
It's definitely, and it's tactics that are still used to this day to like divide people and create a power vacuum for the people who want to step into that role. You know what I mean?
You want to step into what role?
Powerful roles. They want to be the heads of things.
Yeah, so they use things that divide us.
So, for example, more recent history, slavery in the United States. There was a period of time when poor white people in the South and slaves in the South had come to the conclusion together that the problem was the rich white people of the South.
Yeah.
That was the cause of all their woes. They were the ones that were keeping people poor. There were reasons why people couldn't move out of their stations in life. Rightfully so. That was the problem, right?
Yeah.
The rich white people, the slave owners and the people in power heard this happening and understood what it was going to happen if they let it happen. So instead what they did is they convinced all the poor white people that actually the reason why you're poor is because of slaves.
Right.
You shouldn't be teaming up with them to battle against us. They're just going to take over everything once you defeat us. We're protecting you from the possibility of this.
Yeah.
You should work with us. And that is what happened. They convinced a ton of poor white people that people who were owned by them were the problem.
And then they created the middle class.
And yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it happens to this day. It's an ancient, obviously, thing that happened back then where you've just convinced a bunch of people that the reason why you're having problems in life is because of these other people.
Mm-hmm.
This land belongs to us. God said so.
Right.
So let's go get it. These are our enemies. Let's just kill them all.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just kill everybody. Take the land. Your life will be way better. But I bet you if you asked most people after all of these events happened, if their life had improved, the answer is probably no. For Joshua, I'm sure. For some people, I'm sure it definitely improved for them.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that for a majority of people, it did not.
Right. And really, you're just moving the stuff around, right? Like they had the people who lived in these areas. Yeah, they would have had their own higher ups. Right. And so you're essentially just replacing the power structure with another power structure that's going to basically be the same thing. It's just different people, you know. And then in chapter 24, the last chapter, Joshua gathers all the tribes again and says, this is what the Lord says, and starts out by retelling the story of the Bible up to now, basically starting with Abraham through to taking out Jericho and all the other people that they took out. Then at the end of this paragraph, he has a line that stood out, which was, I sent swarms of hornets ahead of you that drove out before you the two kings of the Amorites. It was not by your sword or by your bow. I gave you a land on which you had not labored and towns that you had not built, and you live in them. You eat the fruit of the vineyards and the olive yards that you did not plant. But it's the swarms of hornets that really stood out. And apparently this is a reference to a prediction in Exodus 23:28, where God says he'll send hornets ahead of them to drive out the Hivites, Canaanites, and Hittites. But I don't think we ever actually saw that story where God sent hornets.
No. I mean, okay.
I did some very brief searching for it and I didn't find it.
Let me do some circular reasoning here, which isn't actually reasoning at all. But okay. So if he's talking to people who were in power in these cities, is it a possibility that these weren't people who were necessarily involved in the battle themselves, but people who were then assigned to stations after all the battles were completed? So are the swarms of hornets like the cannon fodder, the soldiers that were sent ahead to take these out so that these people could come in and live on the land? Because I can't imagine every single person was fighting. They had an army.
Oh, so you're thinking the Hornets was the army of Israel?
Yeah, he's saying basically he's saying I sent all of our troops ahead to do this. You guys didn't actually do anything, but then you got it.
Yeah,
this is what I did for you.
I mean, but then it also says that it's not it was not by your sword or by your bow.
Well, it's not by their sword or their bow.
Right.
It was by other people's swords and bows.
I mean, their army was Israelites.
Yeah. I understand. I'm just thinking that, like, is he basically like...
I just feel like there's a story missing. I feel like there's a story
about hornets.
Yeah, like
I am of the opinion that the hornets are a euphemism or something.
Yeah, I think it's literal. I think there was literally probably a story where God sent hornets. Kind of like
a lot of hornets.
What's that?
That's a lot of hornets.
Yeah, well, he's God. You know, he can't make gold, but he can make hornets. He has a very limited hornets, locusts, frogs. He's good at that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Making gold, not so much.
Not so much.
That you need requires special skills.
That's the devil's rock.
It's the devil's rock. Gold.
That's why it's so soft and malleable.
Yeah. Pretty. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. Don't serve other gods. So Joshua is continuing to give his speech and blah, blah, blah. Don't serve other gods. It turns into kind of this funny back and forth where people are like, far be it from us that we should forsake the Lord to serve other gods. And Joshua says, he's a jealous God. He will not forgive your transgressions or sins. Tell that to Jesus. And they're like, no, we'll serve the Lord. And he goes, you're all witnesses against yourselves. You said you'd serve the Lord. And they're like, we are witnesses. And he's like, then put away the foreign gods. And he says that as if they're just saying, oh, like, we'll serve the Lord and everything while they're holding like idols and stuff like that. And then at 110 years young, Joshua dies and is buried in his little town.
110, huh?
110. And I should give an honorable mention here to Eleazar, a priest who keeps getting mentioned, but I ended up cutting around for some reason. He just never made the cut. Eleazar was a priest and the son of Aaron, who also dies. And it was mentioned multiple times throughout here. And it sounded like he was almost like Joshua's second in command. That's the story of Joshua.
That's it? That's the end?
Yeah.
Well, I don't much care for Joshua.
Yeah, I know. Seems like kind of just a warlord.
I mean, 100%.
Yeah.
That is what he is. Again, it's just a weird story to like really lean into for religion.
Yeah. What I kept coming back to is the fact that, like, you know, it's easy to kind of get sucked into the narrative of what is said in this book, but then when you read between the lines, because we're kind of starting to get, like, you can't trust any of the stories. No. Obviously, he's talking about the earth standing still for a day,
right?
So you can't trust the historical value of the stories, but you can kind of start seeing where some of this stuff might have kind of happened. You know, there was probably battles that took place that captured some of these lands, but at the end of the day, like, the Israelites are Canaanites. Like, they are from this area as well. They're not, like, there's nothing about them that really sets them apart. And if I remember correctly, there's been genetic testing to show that, like, that they absolutely are from this area as well.
Yeah, arbitrary lines have been done.
Yeah, and basically this is kind of comes down to, you can't even say racism really, because, like, they're from different tribes,
right?
So they
tribalism.
They're not even, like, necessarily all that related to each other in like as much, like, like the Hittites and the Hivites and all those people are all probably all related to each other to some extent in this area, right?
Sure.
But it kind of is like I talked about with New York, where like, you know, you have all these different cultures in the same area and everything like that. And this is like saying, we're going to band together all of the Irish and the
So you're saying
Jewish
that the
and-
Bible is also gangs of New York.
Kind of. Yeah. Where you're getting these different gangs together and saying, and really like these different ethnic groups together and saying, we're going to be the superior ones.
Right.
Even though we already live around all of
What do you think the motivation behind that is? Like, was this a land that was bountiful? Like,
not at this point, but it was so
you
according
mean by this point you mean today?
No, so according to archaeologists, around 1170 BCE, like 1180 to 1170 BCE, there was a famine in the land that happened. There was a drought.
Okay.
There's a really bad drought in the area, and there was localized climate change. So before that, this area apparently, as I understand it, was very green and bountiful and nice and everything. But during that decade, or around that decade, serious climate change happened in that area to turn it more arid and desert-like. So it was at one point very bountiful. Now it's much more arid and things like that. This story, in theory, happens around that time.
Okay.
But, you know, it's that famine, that drought is never talked about specifically in the Bible.
Okay. So do you think that this was motivated by perhaps a area getting hit by famine and then people deciding they need to move to an area that is more bountiful?
That's what they are. Well, sort of. So what historians say actually happened, archaeologists and folks say actually happened, is this drought happened. All these different superpowers of the time left the area because of this famine, and they receded back into their homelands, right? And it's at this time that most likely from the hills in the area came these tribes, and they took over the towns, and then they all banded together to create a confederacy of tribes.
Gotcha.
Right. And they called themselves Israel or Judah, you know, which was in the south.
Okay. Makes sense. I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Obviously.
And then they create this story. So when you know that like, oh, these are the same people who lived there, they're not defeating some outside people that had taken over this land or anything like that. They are the people of that land.
Right.
You start realizing like, oh, this is like they're drawing arbitrary boundaries between them and stuff like that.
Well, and then it gives them through these stories, it gives them what they feel is meaningful claim to the land.
Yes.
Just still being used today.
Right. It's all about the land. At the end of the day, the vast majority of the Old Testament is about claiming ownership over the land.
Yeah. Knowing what I know about a lot of Christians I've met in my life, and I'll say a majority of Christians that I've met throughout my life are decent, kind people. And a lot of people who talk about their love of God and of the Bible. And then I hear stories like this and I'm like, what do you mean?
What do you mean?
I don't understand.
Yeah.
How all these people who have such love and want in their heart to like be kind people and be important givers in society and things like that, and just spout like Bible verses as their justification, although I feel like they'd probably be kind people without it. To hear stories like this, whole books like this of the Bible that are just fucking terrible.
Yeah.
I want to say like, okay, fine. Jesus as an idea, cool, right? But what about this? And like, how can you justify those two things coexisting to create this religion that they've built up in their head?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the tough part about this is even if you let go of the Old Testament and realize, okay, it's not real, then you're still stuck with the fact that
Jesus believed it was real, though. They talk about it all the time.
The only authority Jesus has
Right.
to be able to claim that he's God and stuff comes from this.
Right.
If this isn't real, then Jesus, who
Loses
is
his
Jesus
authority.
supposed to be?
Right.
You know, it's all based on this being real.
Yeah.
So if this isn't real, then there's no Jesus.
Right.
Because
There's no authority in him being the Son of God.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Authority from who and
Right.
what God.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So that's the tough part about it for Christians who would want to just ignore the Old Testament is it's the foundation of everything.
Yep.
I've been looking into Mormonism recently, which and I keep kind of coming back to like, do I really need to read the Book of Mormon? Because it's got the same flaw as Christianity at the end of the day. If the Old Testament has holes in it and does not hold up to being real, then Mormonism isn't real.
Right.
Like, there's no real difference between that and Christianity in that respect. So yeah, so that's the Book of Joshua. We're moving on from here to the Book of Judges, so that'll be next up.
Okay. We get to learn about why Christians are so judgy.
Yeah, well, it's not really judges like that. It's more like warlords.
Oh,
more warlords is essentially what judges were.
Yeah.
There's going to be at least one. There is one woman judge that we are going to talk about. Not at least. There's exactly one. There may have been more, but we're only hearing about one of them. And then this is also the book where we get Samson, story of Samson.
I know that story.
Yeah, most folks do. I think that's like the only one in the Book of Judges that most folks know.
There's hold on. I know he was the guy with the hair.
Yeah.
Who was the guy that took out the giant?
You're thinking of David and Goliath.
David and Goliath.
Which we will eventually get to.
Okay. I was like, was it that she cut his hair so then he couldn't take out the giant? Like, I'm conflating them all in my head.
I like where that story's going, though. Yeah. Yeah, no, it'll be interesting because, again, like, I don't really remember the story of Samson as complete, you know.
Wait to dissect that story because a lot of people have used, I feel like, and I'm just coming to this as an assumption, which I feel like a lot of people do in religion anyway, but I am coming to this from the assumption that this story has been used a lot to take power away from women.
Oh, that's interesting.
She is the one.
Delilah, I think, if I remember right.
Yes, Samson and Delilah. She's been demonized as the person who stripped him of his power.
Right.
How easy is it to translate? We're going to digress here for a second. How easy is it to translate that into like women shouldn't be allowed to do that?
Yeah. Well, even that is just an echo of the story of Eve.
Right.
Right.
Yes,
you know?
Certainly. Yeah. But you give a woman an inch and she takes a mile
of hair.
Took away his masculinity.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because obviously today there's a lot of people who would argue that having long hair is the opposite.
I wonder just the way you were phrasing that, it makes me wonder if like originally the story was her cutting off his penis.
Oh, that would be a way better story.
Yeah, and they were like, we don't want to give women that idea. We need to change that to his hair.
We should read it two different ways and replace the word hair with penis and see how much better that sounds.
He had very long hair.
He had a very long penis.
Yeah.
And Delilah wanted him to look presentable for his big fight.
It was all dreadlocked. So we'll see how that story goes and how it holds up. Because that's another thing is Samson, I happen to know that he is not a great guy either. From what I've seen. So.
One can only make the assumption that most characters in the Bible are not great people. But yeah, no, that's another one of those stories that you tell children. So it'll be interesting because I've never actually like read it, and I don't recall like the exact story other than like she cut his hair and he lost his power.
Yeah.
Which sounds like a story from a fucking comic book
or Greek mythology.
Yeah, definitely Greek mythology. Yeah. So. It'll be interesting to hear the actual story.
What's cool too about the Book of Judges, what I'm looking forward to getting into.
Hey, cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really hip and with it. What's rad about the Book of Judges is unlike
Sound like a youth group leader. Hello, fellow children.
Fellow children. That really does sound like a youth group leader.
What's rad about the Book of Judges?
It's kind of like a diss album.
It's like when Drake came after Kanye.
I was thinking it's when Vanilla Ice came after Eminem. So I'm trying not to use the word interesting because I know I use it way too much, but the Book of Judges, more than Joshua, way more than Joshua, is actually a compilation of older writings that predates, obviously because of the definition of older, predates the Book of Judges.
Yeah.
Gives you kind of some insight into where all this stuff might have originated. Anywho.
Sounds rad.
Yeah. And with that, they all lived. Most of them didn't live.
No.
Most of them did not live.
They all died.
Yeah, but the rest of them, they lived miserably ever after. Thank you so much for checking out our podcast. Help us share the good news by sending this to a friend or leaving a review to help others find us. And if you want to support us with a donation, you can do that on our website at bsfa.cc. Dude, shut the fuck up. Frodo, no.
No.
No. No. He just walked out, passive aggressively meowed.